Hello and welcome to this episode of Conversations on Conflict. I'm your host, Ben Kreitzberg, one of the program managers for the Conflict Resolution Center in Montgomery County. And today I am joined for this episode by one of our legal interns, John, who is undergoing his summer internship with our center. And I wanted to bring him on and have a conversation about the way he views conflict as a law student and get some inside perspective on what it looks like breaking into a career in law. As many of you know, we're a mediation center, so we work outside the legal realm, but very, very close to it, providing mediation services for free for the people in the county. John here was really interested in ADR and mediation when it comes to how it plays a part in the world of ADR. So John, thanks for joining us today. If you want to introduce yourself to the people tuning in and just say a few words about what brought you to mediation in our center in the first place.
Absolutely, Ben. Well, first, thanks for having me here. My name is John McWhorter. I'm a second-year law student at the George Washington University Law School, which is out in Foggy Bottom in DC. And yeah, I mean, I've really enjoyed interning here for the past few weeks. So far, I've been doing things like, intake, speaking with clients, observing some mediations, which has been really, really nice. But yeah, no, it's been a great experience so far, and it's really fueled my interest in ADR, which is alternative dispute resolution, which is something I've always been interested in. I've always seen myself as the type of attorney that's probably a bit more effective at reaching out to people one-on-one, rather than putting a bit of a performance in the courtroom. That's just always been my style. So I think studying something like ADR or mediation greatly benefits that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, fantastic. I think you're in the right place. And so let me ask you, how much did you know about mediation or did you learn about mediation in your courses prior to joining our center?
So not specifically through our courses. So for every first year law student, they actually pre-pick our courses. Unfortunately, there isn't really like an ADR type course in there. Thankfully though, in my first year, I did compete in like negotiations competitions and ADR competitions. And so we learned a little bit about mediation through that process. But okay. I kind of wanted to get a closer look at it and see how it was really done in like the real world, rather than like in a simulated one-on-one environment.
Yeah, definitely. And now I know you've actually had the opportunity to observe a few mediation sessions that were community cases facilitated by our center. What were your first impressions or thoughts in seeing something like that? Like you were saying, taken out of the simulated environment and more, the real deal. It was actually really, really informative. I think it really helped solidify what I already thought of this center, and it's that, you guys do real work to help like real people.
And it really kind of posed mediation as a very viable solution that I think a lot of people should be a little bit more aware of. It's a very cost-effective solution to solving some problems that are very commonplace in our society. And working, observing the mediators at the center, specifically two of them, Larry and Bridget, I learned a lot just observing them for an hour and speaking with them. So it's been a great experience so far to really see that intersection between being a lawyer but also being a mediator, and how the skills in both those things really combine and you become better at doing both, really.
Yeah, and actually, you said something that was pretty interesting to me about how you specifically mentioned the cost effectiveness of mediation versus going through the traditional court process. A lot of our volunteer mediators, as I know but our viewers may not know, are or were attorneys in their past life, and many of them refer to themselves as attorneys in recovery or lawyers in recovery. So I do want to ask you, because it is, the difference between a mediator and a lawyer can be, drastically different, even though one person can wear both hats. Can you talk a little bit about how you see the differences in culture when it comes to, practicing attorneys versus practicing mediators, and the experiences that you've seen so far?
Well, I think there's probably a lot less pressure when you're practicing mediator rather than an attorney, at least when working with a center like this one. When you're an attorney, you have like your billable hours, and you're kind of almost playing to win for a specific side. But then here, really being an unbiased party in the situation, I think really forces you to change your perspective and change your approach to the whole thing. And it's more of being a facilitator and kind of understanding the needs of both parties, rather than just speaking to your client specifically to try to get them the best deal. I think with being a mediator, you have to have a much more holistic lens of the situation.
Yeah, no, definitely. Do you feel like the skills that you've seen put into practice by mediators during sessions would be really useful for folks who are just starting out in a career in law like yourself?
I think so. I think I've definitely been learning a lot, and hopefully, ideally, one day I get to help in the mediation as well. But I'm picking up a lot of things that I would want to apply towards my own like legal practice, specifically, like the listening skills that you need in order to really get through to both parties. Oftentimes these two people that are engaging in the mediation are really in a difficult point in their lives. So for them to be able to feel like they've been heard, I think is really useful. And I think you could apply that to people engaging in litigation or in a court case as well. At the end of the day, both mediators and attorneys are working with people on a daily basis. And so I think the listening skills that you pick up through mediation are very, very useful.
Yeah, well, I'm glad to hear that you're getting something out of this. So I want to ask you a little bit about your background and your experiences that brought you into law school in the first place. What kind of influenced that decision? Do you feel like and you mentioned participating in some negotiation and ADR competitions. Did you always feel like you were good at conflict growing up? Meaning you were good at arguing and getting your point across. Or how did that work out for you?
Yeah, so it was actually kind of funny. So my father, so he passed away when I was 7. And one of my earliest memories is him kind of looking at me when I was like 3 or 4, being like, "You're going to be an attorney."
There you
and
go.
I was like, okay. So my whole life has really just been a mission towards getting to law school. And thankfully, I know some situations if like parents like kind of bestow a career on a child, they end up hating it. I've ended up loving it. After completing a year in law school, I'm fairly certain that that's where I need to be. But yeah, growing up in my house, I'm the oldest of 3, and so there was a lot of arguing going on, just like the way brothers do.
Yeah.
And that really was a training ground for my argumentative skills. And being the oldest brother, I always tried to go up to bat for my younger brothers whenever they got in trouble with my mom or something, to kind of like be their advocate.
You were taking on clients at an early age.
Exactly.
Then. Yeah. Fair enough.
So, but yeah, I really wouldn't be where I am without the support system I had at home. My mom, my grandparents, my brothers, like they've really been cheering me on since day one, and I kind of owe pretty much everything to them.
Well, that's awesome. I mean, it's always good to have that support network, helping you along, and congratulations to getting to where you're at. That's awesome.
Thank you.
So now that we've I've talked a little bit about your experiences and what led you to choosing this in the first place. I don't know. Do you have any advice for anybody who might be watching who's considering a career in either mediation or just law in general? Any pointers you would give them for taking that step, other than the advice to have a support system? That's not something that I guess everybody can have, but other than that, any words of advice or wisdom?
Yeah, absolutely. Always keep an open mind. Try to really approach every situation with a completely blank slate, because a lot of these people on the surface, they may be people that society has kind of cast off. Unfortunately, that's just the reality we live in. But at the end of the day, everyone has a story. Everyone has a perspective, and as this center kind of preaches, we want to help as many people as we can. So I think going into every situation, trying to help as many people as possible. And like I said earlier, listening. Just before acting. I know a lot of people like to jump the gun and make very quick judgments, but really there's a lot of value in listening first and then taking the time to speak rather than speaking just to speak.
Yeah.
So I think that patience is very important, and it's a skill that I think a lot of people who want to go to law school or people who are just starting off in law school, I think that's something that's very useful to kind of practice.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think that sounds like some pretty good advice. Now I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about your perspectives and how you view certain aspects of attorneys and being an attorney. I know there's kind of a lot of people might have some preconceived notions about attorneys as being well, actually, let me throw it to you. How do you think most people out that aren't attorneys view attorneys and lawyers?
I think they see us as almost like snakes, a little bit like the how to get away with murder type, where in a court case someone comes in and it's like, this is the evidence you've never seen before. I think people think it's a lot more facetious than it is. But after my experience being in law school, and specifically being in DC, which is like the lawyer capital of the world besides like maybe New York, attorneys are very, very giving people, I think. The profession does have a bad reputation, and there are a few bad apples. Like obviously, like every profession, there are attorneys that like to, go against ethical standards. But at the end of the day, I've never really met an attorney who's not wanted to help me. Like for example, like Larry. I spoke with him on a Zoom call, and he was very, very helpful. He gave me a lot of really useful information, and oftentimes, like I'll reach out to attorneys on LinkedIn who have pretty high positions at firms that have they don't need to be speaking to law students, and they've always been like, yeah, let's set up a phone call, and they're always very ready to give advice. I think also, specifically GW, the law school that I go to, there's a big emphasis on public interest law and, offering time to causes such as CRCMC or other nonprofits that, there's a really big emphasis on helping the community, like through things like this or like pro bono work that also like really big firms emphasize as well.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you kind of already got into what my next question was going to be is, what are some things that you would say to change the minds of people or change the perceptions of people who might view lawyers, to use your words, as snakes or, sort of facetious people, or, they're just there to get the money, that's people, I've heard people say that, the only people that win in court are the lawyers, right? Like that's what it comes down to.
I think take the time to speak with one. I think it is overall a lucrative profession, but it is very hard to get there. I can say that now after going through a year of law school. Like this was probably the toughest year of my life, just like in terms of going through finals, going through classes, getting cold called. Law school is a different beast, and I can see now why the profession is, as highly valued as it is, because it's incredibly difficult to do the work that lawyers do. And I think just don't base your conceived notions off of shows like Suits.
Yeah, I was going to say a lot of TV shows that give people those perceptions.
I love Suits. I think it's a great show, but it's not it's not really that similar to what lawyers do. Or like Better Call Saul. Not everyone is like Saul Goodman.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't base my perception of doctors off like Grey's Anatomy. So I think
fair enough. I think that's a good that's a good point there. So what are some things that you can see yourself, taking away from this experience and learning about mediation, and sharing with others when you go back to school, if there is anything?
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot. I think I think I've developed an increased desire to help these communities, specifically here in Montgomery County. Speaking with a lot of our clients, it's given me a desire to help these people, and seeing the mediators give their time and the programs that you guys do, like with schools and all that. I think it's a very real service, and to be able to see firsthand the positive effect of what you're doing, I think is very rewarding. And so I would definitely talk to a lot of my peers to try to persuade them to consider doing public interest work, or volunteering with a mediation clinic, or even a legal clinic. I think there's a lot of value in that.
Yeah, awesome. Well, great. Yeah, I mean, please, send everybody over. We need all the help we can get. So do you see yourself, well, actually, let me ask this. I know a lot of practicing lawyers will also, sort of do mediation on the side. Have you seen a lot of that yourself, or is that your perception as well, or is that just maybe something that I feel because I'm working for a mediation center, so I might see it more?
Not a whole lot. I think, so one of the projects that I'm working on here is researching how like law firms and clinics market their mediation services.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's become a lot more commonplace than I thought it was at first.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's definitely something that more attorneys should be doing if they can. I definitely would want to do it once I'm a practicing attorney. I think aside from just like a nice change of pace from the regular day in the life at a firm, I think it's very rewarding, like I said earlier, to
Mm-hmm.
be able to see firsthand helping these people figure out, problems that really put a ginormous strain on their life.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I definitely think if there aren't many attorneys doing it, many more should.
Mm. Yeah, no, I definitely have the same perspective where, the reward you get from seeing firsthand how a process like mediation can increase the quality of life for people is incredible. So, yeah, definitely agree with you on that. So I know, we're sort of, I don't want to take up too much of your time today, but there is a question that I like to ask all the guests that come on to Conversations on Conflict. And that question is, what does peace in the community look like to you? Peace
in the community. That's interesting.
Yeah. Doesn't have to be too deep or anything, no. But just.
Yeah, I'm gonna.
It's a pretty broad question, I know.
I think peace in the community is where people aren't afraid to have disagreements and don't run away from conflict, but they're able to solve it in a way where everyone walks away with their dignity, where everyone still respects one another, where people aren't afraid to engage in healthy discourse. I think that's what peace is. It's impossible to grow up in a world where no one disagrees on anything.
Yeah.
It's just human nature. So I think when we get to a spot where we're willing to talk to the people that we disagree with and not, write them away completely because we disagree with them, I think that's what peace in the community looks like.
Yeah, well, I love that perspective. Absolutely, absolutely. Well, John, I want to thank you again for coming on today and spending some time to share some perspective with our viewers and everybody tuning in. Is there anything else you wanted to mention to anybody who's watching before we sign off here today?
Could I give a shout out to my grandparents?
Please do. Yeah.
Yeah. So they're Cuban, so I'll say it in Spanish. Pero abuelo y abuela, te quiero mucho. Gracias por su apoyo y por todo lo que haces para mí. Yeah, and thank you for your time, for having me here.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, thank you so much. Yeah. And I want to thank everybody who tuned in today to catch this episode of Conversations on Conflict. As always, I'm your host, Ben Kreitzberg, and if you want to know more about our center or how you can assist our center and support our programs and the services we provide for the people in our community, you can visit our website at CRCMC.org. And if you'd like to make a contribution or a donation to help us provide our services and increase accessibility for people in the county, you can make a donation at crcmc.org/donate now. Thanks again for tuning in, and thanks again, John.
Yeah.
Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.